All right, here is a question that we get a lot. What is earnest money and how does that work? What's it all about? So I'm going to tell you, when you write an offer on a house, you're going to submit your offer with earnest money. So earnest money is essentially a deposit or a promise to say, hey, I'm going to agree to the terms of this contract that the seller and the buyer have agreed to. So earnest money is basically putting that deposit down. Here in Wichita, Kansas, our earnest money, like on, just under $200,000 is our average price point. A $500 check that's held at the title company by the escrow officer is usually what we do. So $500 is kind of that deposit you're putting up front. If there's some competition, you'll see earnest money go up, or a higher priced house, you'll see $1,000, maybe $2,000, $4,000, $5,000 sometimes. If there's some competition for a home or in a higher price point. So that's what earnest money is, and here's why that's important. So you're agreeing to the terms of the contract, and so earnest money is a deposit or an early payment for what you're about to do in that contract. So if you're buying a house at $200,000, you're putting a small portion of that down, and that's going to actually be credited to you at closing. So if you have out-of-pocket expenses like your down payment or your closing costs or your prepaids like taxes and insurance, that earnest money is actually going to pay for that then if you continue all the way to closing and then buy the house and finalize the deal. So if you break the terms of the contract, however, you are basically forfeiting that money to the seller. Now there are some things that can happen where the contract still falls apart, and then we can get to an agreement where the seller still released the earnest money. So there are cases where lending fell through and it didn't work, and so we have a paragraph in our contract where we go, hey, we're working on this and we're agreeing to this contract as long as we can make sure the buyers are approved at that conventional loan on 30 years at 3.5%. So if for some reason that falls apart, we go, hey, lending fell apart, we'd like to have the earnest money released, and we make a request for that. So then there's a paragraph for inspection period. Let's say something major comes up in the inspection that nobody knew about, and we just can't get to terms on how to move forward through that. So let's say we found out a major foundation issue, and we go, man, nobody knew what was going on, and the seller doesn't really know how to fix it, and they can't fix it in a way to make you as the buyer feel comfortable, or the finances that are going to go into fixing that. We can't arrive at a conclusion on that. We can then go, we're too far apart still. We would like to submit this request to release the earnest money back to the buyer. So there's some cases in which that can happen, but essentially it's just your agreement to go, hey, we're going to follow through with this contract and agree to the terms of it all the way to closing. And then if we get to closing, then this money is going to go toward our closing fees and our expenses in buying that house. So that is basically how earnest money works. There's a lot of other questions I'm sure some of you have. So if you have those questions, feel free to ask. I'd love to go over that with you. But that's a general sense of how earnest money works, and I hope that helps you feel more comfortable in the buying process.